What is time? According to Doctor Who, time is not simply a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a nonlinear, non-subjective point of view, it's more like a big ball of timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff. In reality, time is a measure of change. We all experience time and change. However, when asked to define time, we are left with
Is time? I don't know. Time is just like the flow of seconds.
Time is what we experience as events happen.
Time is a dimension.
Time is the lapsing of moments, one from the present into the future.
It's a difficult concept to understand. As temporal beings, we think in terms of time. We say before, after, during, yesterday, today, tomorrow, and so on and so forth. We know things in terms of beginnings and endings of once upon a time and happily ever after. However, did the universe have a starting point in time?
Oh, the universe did have a starting point of time.
um, well, I mean, there was the Big Bang, but then, was that the start of it? Or was something before then? It's kind of the nature of science. There always is another question, but yeah, eventually, I think there was a creation event.
I suppose it might have, it must have. Seems likely.
The answer is yes. It appears the universe did have a starting point. There is increasingly persuasive evidence that the Big Bang occurred, thanks to mathematicians and physicists like Albert Einstein, Alexander Friedman, and Georges Lemaitre. Einstein's equations were applicable to an understanding of the universe's relationship to time not thought of before. They seemed to point to the expanding of the universe over time. If that were true, Lemaitre proposed the universe must have begun in a primeval atom that exploded, leading to the expansion of the universe. And thus, the Big Bang Theory was born.
Hot, dense state that nearly 14 billion years ago expansion started.
No, not that Big Bang Theory. The evidence pointing towards a beginning in time for the universe made many scientists and scientific atheists reevaluate their prior belief in a perpetual universe without a beginning in time. But what caused the primeval atom to explode? Where did it come from?
I wouldn't say that there was anything before the Big Bang because, and time, you can't talk about time before that or anything before that because nothing was there.
It's a good question. Before that, I mean, we didn't exist and our universe didn't exist, and maybe something else existed that led to this, or maybe it didn't. I don't know. I kind of just view that as the start, and then before then, it's just kind of more than I can comprehend.
The Big Bang is a theory. Don't know if it's accurate or not, but presumably God knows what existed before the universe existed, and God existed before the universe. So mysterious, beyond my comprehension.
To be honest, we don't know what happened before the Big Bang. There technically is no such thing as before the Big Bang. The before implies there was something happening beyond the beginning of time. However, there is something that transcends time.
I would say that because he's eternal, that means he's out of time, so he's not constricted by past, present, things like that.
I mean, he kind of exists outside of our perception of time, but it's very hard our relationship with God because he experiences a lot of things that we can never experience, and so trying to understand him, it's hard for us to kind of understand things on a level that we've never experienced.
Well, unlike human beings who are subject to living in the present and the present only, apparently God transcends time, which is pretty cool on God's part.
God is outside of time. He is eternal. He is unchanging, unbound by the limits of time. He is above and outside the whole order of time and change. The difficulty of describing God's relationship to time mainly lies in our temporal nature. Because we only know things in terms of time, We can only describe things in its terms. God, the very being that transcends time, must be the cause for the beginning of time. He is the primary cause that set the universe in motion. However, even though God is the primary cause, that doesn't mean that he is/was/will be personally responsible for everything that has occurred in our universe since the dawn of time. God, as the primary cause, is responsible for using other causes to bring about a desired effect. There are some people who misunderstand this, believing that God is directly responsible for unexplainable things within our natural world. This is called God of the gaps. God does not directly intervene with his creation. He prefers to work through his secondary causes, the beings or things actually causing things through the power given to them by God. The God of the gaps idea often fits in with a literalistic view of Genesis 1.
I don't believe in evolution, I know creation's true. I believe that God above created me and you. So praise his name for what he made, give credit where it's due. I don't believe in evolution, I know creation's true.
Yeah, I would say that you could interpret the Genesis story in both ways because, I mean, God is, according to the Bible, the creator of the world, but scientifically sometimes the stories in Genesis don't always match up with what it actually says.
Figuratively.
Okay.
I think it was written to be understood by the people of the time, and then there's a lot of even when I'm teaching probability and statistics, there's a lot of things that I kind of gloss over that I go in detail with AP stats, and so the actual creation of the world, I don't think he needed to get into every little nitty-gritty detail with people thousands of years ago, and so I think it's figuratively.
I'm an English person, so I like the figurative, so that's my take on that.
Genesis 1's purpose was to serve as a non-myth response to the Babylonian creation myth of the Enuma Elish. Genesis is a story of love, life, and chosen creation, showing God's loving relationship with mankind, as opposed to the violent, death-filled creation present in the Enuma Elish. Another difference that appears is in how the world is created. God created the universe in an orderly way, outside of time, using nothing except for his divine words. However, the Babylonian gods created the world using parts of the world that must have already been created, like water. The Babylonian creation myth must have existed within time, as it existed within space. Genesis 1 is not meant to be fully literal. However, this has caused people to have literalistic views such as creationism and concordism. Creationism is the rejection of scientific theory of evolution and acceptance of the literal meaning of Genesis 1, including the idea of creation happening in 6 24-hour-long days. But the Earth is not 6,000 years, based on the timeline of the Bible. Science has told us through studies of fossils and genetics that the universe is billions of years old. Science also, specifically the theory of evolution, does not deny God as the creator of the universe. It simply explains the secondary causes that God has used to bring about a desired effect in time. But science cannot explain everything. When people try to create a harmony between every detail in Genesis 1 and cosmology, the theory of the origin and evolution of the universe, they fall into the error of concordism. They miss the bigger picture. Science is always changing through time, and sacred scripture uses these different teachings of the ages to express the far deeper and greater truths that science cannot explain. But where does science fit into this? Science's goal is to answer questions about our natural world, including time, mostly in a different way from theology. Often, this has to do with physics, or more specifically, entropy.
Well, over time, because the universe is becoming more and more disordered, everything will eventually get to the most disordered state, and then everything will pretty much be equal, and that's known, I think, as heat death. Yeah, time.
Entropy is a measure of randomness and or chaos, and it just keeps increasing with time. And so entropy, you can decrease the entropy in one area, but by doing that, you've increased the entropy elsewhere. And so universally, it's always increasing. And so we can kind of use that to measure time. So as entropy increases, so does time increase. And so they're related that way.
Urge toward disorder, as I recall from my high school chemistry, but it's been a few years. The impulse toward disorder presumes that there's a balance between order and disorder, and one must tip toward disorder in order to eventually achieve order. It's a very paradoxical thing. Again,
In basic terms, entropy is the increasing disorder within our universe. This began at the Big Bang, in which the primeval atom, previously discussed, was as ordered as our universe could possibly have been. Since then, the universe has been progressing to disorder. To make this easier to understand, think of a pile of papers, evenly stacked and specifically organized. There is only one way for the papers to be perfectly ordered, but once dropped, there are an infinite amount of ways the paper could disperse. The papers cannot reorder themselves of their own volition. In this understanding of entropy, we can relate this to the progression of time. Because entropy only happens in one direction, and that the universe cannot reorder itself from disorder, the concept referred to as the arrow of time offers the most clarity. The arrow of time means that time progresses in only one direction. However, this direction appears not to be a constant progression.
Like, according to the special relativity, or just like in general, like my life moves slower than your life.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, so like the rate at which we because what Einstein established, the rate at which we experience time is different depending on where you are, depending on where the observer is, related to both speed and gravity.
again, is an elusive thing because the lapsing of present into future is impacted by various things in the universe. If I'm floating around the Earth super fast, time appears to me to be going slower or faster than it does for someone else in the universe. Not sure that makes it, what was your question, relative? Subjective. So I guess it is subjective in the sense that the subject that is experiencing the lapsing of present into the future is relative to your position and your speed within the universe. I don't know if that answered you.
Short answer. Time doesn't necessarily pass in a constant way. Long answer. Time passes differently depending on certain factors. One of these is space. Time and space combine to make something called the space-time continuum. This means that space and time are pretty much directly related. If you are moving through space, you are moving through time faster. On the other hand, if you are stationary in space, time moves slower. This relationship is also present in relation to gravity. Higher gravity means moving through time slower, as lower gravity means moving through time faster. This doesn't necessarily mean time is different for different people, as we are all moving through space too slow for our movement to affect our perception of time. However, the differences in gravity do affect perception of time. A clock set on the first floor of a building is going to run slower than a clock in an airplane. As a whole, we can talk about time in different ways, in science and theology. None of them have the whole answer to time. We must look at both of them to find the truth. As St. Pope John Paul II said, science can purify religion from error and superstition. Religion can purify science from idolatry and false absolutes. Faith and science must work in tandem to answer questions about our world.